Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Good evening, and may the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. This is our episode number 8 on the subject, the woman and the red dragon. And we will be focusing verse 15 and verse 16. And since that is the verse stated to us our page 76, saying, the symbol of the woman in the New Testament times covers 3 divisions. First, the apostolic period, and second, her absence from civilization in the wilderness for 1,260 days or years of papal persecution, verses 6 and 14. The third, the last period of the church while in conflict with the dragon, verses 15 to verse 17. But if you will look at answerer number 2 on page 45, it begins on Revelation 12 verse 13 to verse 17, saying, nearly all Christians agree that the only tenable interpretation of the woman, her mention, is that she symbolizes the church, and the fact that she gave birth to the man-child, which is Jesus Christ, shows that she is therefore symbolical of the church in at least the Christian dispensation. Answerer number 2, page 45. To repeat again, this statement cannot be applied to the first advent of Jesus Christ, with 2 main reasons. The first reason is that the church that gave birth to Jesus Christ at His first advent is not the Christian church, but rather it is the Jewish church, according to SR page 72. It says, thus it was the Jewish church that brought forth the Son of God, and not the Christian. 2SR on page 72. Whereas the statement in answerer number 2, page 45, the church mentioned here, which is the woman, is the church that gave birth to the man-child, and accordingly, this church must be symbolical of the church in at least the Christian dispensation. And we know the Christian dispensation commenced in 31 AD, which is opposite to the description of the church the woman that gave birth to Jesus Christ at His first advent. Because the statement in 2SR, page 72, it says, therefore, the symbol points back at least 31 years before the beginning of the Christian church. For the woman, the church was travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. So let us distinctly separate the fulfillment of the prophecy on Revelation chapter 12, more particularly to verse 13, because the direct fulfillment of such verse must be in the judgment of the living. And the third reason is that, according to Revelation 12, verse 13, the woman that brought forth the man-child had been persecuted by the dragon. And it is quite opposite to the first advent of Jesus Christ, for the woman which brought forth the man-child, which is Jesus Christ, is the Jewish church, and it is not the Jewish church that had been persecuted by the dragon, but rather the Christian church. But the Christian church is not the one who brought forth the man-child. And rather than persecuting the Jewish church which brought forth the man-child, according to tract number 12, page 43, it became the instruments of the devil to persecute the Christian church. So here in 2SR page 67, it says, the next necessary step is to find when the dragon persecuted the woman, which is the Christian church. We shall then have the truth of the time Satan was cast out. The time of persecution is recorded in Acts chapter 8, verse 1. And Saul was consenting unto his death, the death of Stephen, and at that time there was a great persecution against the church, which was at Jerusalem. And there were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. Thus the great persecution against the church was about 34 AD. 2SR page 67. So, those are the three strong reasons why Revelation chapter 12 is only primarily applied to the first advent of Jesus Christ, due to the fact that the description given in the Bible does not exactly fit to the occurrence on the first advent of Jesus Christ. Now, let us continue, brothers and sisters. Now, if you will notice, in our reading in 2SR page 76, the verses that had been given by the sharper's rod concerning the last and the third period of the woman in the New Testament division is Revelation 12, verse 15, 16, and 17. It says, third, the last period of the church while in conflict with the dragon, and the quotation was verse 15 to 17. But verse 15, it was applied also by B.T. Houghton during the dark ages of religion. So verse 15, there is a groundwork, brothers and sisters. But verse 16, there is no groundwork. Verse 16, there is only one singular fulfillment of that verse. Now, here in answerer number 2, pages 10 and page 11, we can immediately see that Revelation 12 verse 15 was applied in the days of Constantine the Great. Now, let us read the statement here in page 11. Just as soon as Satan caused his agents to cease oppressing the Christians and to start fellowshipping with them, he beguiled them into thinking him their friend. Thus, being ease of his persecution, they fell asleep spiritually, and while they sleep, he sowed the tares. Yea, he made a complete turnabout, and even compelled the heathen to join the church, thereby casting out of his mouth water as flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Revelation 12 verse 15. From persecuting those who would unite with the church, he turned to persecuting those who would not, so that she might be flooded with unconverted heathen and thereby carried away of the flood. Now, let us study closely, brothers and sisters, Revelation 12, verse 15. To repeat again, the application made in Revelation chapter 12, verse 15 during the Dark Ages is only the groundwork. It is not the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy. There's also the statement here in 2SR, by which the shepherd's rod also applied it during the dark ages of religion. And it is recorded on 2SR 134 and also 135. Entitled, I would like just to read the title, How Was the Church Paganized? So it says, How was the church paganized? So, here, brothers and sisters, let us read the statement. It was the Roman emperors who paganized the church. And as the pagans always observed Sunday, the Sabbath was set aside as far as the church authorities, the priests, and the emperors were concerned. The pagans cared nothing for the Sabbath. They were not taught its sacredness, and the few Christians who tried to keep the holiday were lost in the multitude. Soon the Sabbath services were a thing of the past. This was accomplished by 508 AD. This satanic act paved the way, and the papacy was set up in 538 AD. The Pope was made the absolute ruler, King of Kings, and a corrector of heretics by his so-called divine authority. The scheme was for the perpetuity of the false doctrines and to keep the truth underfoot forever. It is a mysterious thing, the way the old enemy of mankind has succeeded in deceiving the strongest intellects. He enthralls them to their own destruction. Thus it has been in every age. 2SR page 134. Now let us ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. What church that had been paganized by the dragon. So, we need to study closely this very important subject, brothers and sisters. And it is very important that we need to enumerate all the candlesticks recorded in the Bible so that we could have a definite understanding. So we could be able to pinpoint immediately what church that had been paganized by the dragon. Now here in 2SR 284, let us read. It says, 2SR page 234. I would like to begin the statement. Therefore, the two candlesticks represents the Old and New Testament church, Jewish and Christian. So it says, therefore the two candlesticks represent the Old Testament and New Testament churches, the Jewish and Christian. Now let us go to the last paragraph. Thus we have a candlestick for each of the two sections of God's church, while the scriptures were being written. On one candlestick and one olive tree to the Jewish, and one candlestick and one olive tree for the apostles, and 7 for the remaining history of the church to the time of the separation of the tares from the wheat, or to the commencement of the harvest. Thus the candlestick, the church in Zechariah's vision, is the tent, denoting a universal church, depicting the living church that shall unite with all the saints since the world began, which will join with the church of the entire universe of God. This candlestick in Zechariah's vision is a glorious one, which in comparison all others stand as nothing, in perfect harmony with the second temple, which in comparison the first stood as nothing. 2SR page 284. Now in this reading in 2SR 284, the voice of inspiration enumerated one by one the entire candlesticks that had been recorded in the Bible. Let us enumerate one by one. The 10 candlesticks. Number 1, the Jewish church. It says, of course, the period of the church, that is the church while the Bible or the Old Testament were being written. So it must be from 1504 BC to 397 BC. So let us, that is the period of the Jewish church. Now we have the Apostolic Church, number 2, while the New Testament are being written. Now let us put from 27 AD to 100 AD. And then the 7 candlesticks, the Ephesus. Number 3 is the Ephesus. And the Ephesus that is from 100 AD to 538 AD. Now, the next one is Smyrna. And we know that Smyrna is the Lutheran church. So, that is the church that follow after the Ephesus. We called it Smyrna, or called as the Lutheran church, and the Presbyterian church. And then next is Thyatira, and we know that that is the Methodist. And Then we have the Sardis, and we know that that is the Baptist Church. And then we have the Philadelphia, and we know that that is the First Day Adventist. And then we have the Laodicea, which is the Seventh-day Adventist. And then we have number 10, the golden candlestick in Zechariah 4. Right? And we know that Smyrna, the Lutheran church, that was from 1500 AD to 1546. So that is Lutherans from 1500 AD to 1546 AD. And then we have Smyrna, the Presbyterian, from 1548 to 1572 AD. And then we have the Pergamos, or we call it the Presbyterian Church, from 1548 to 1572 AD. So that is the Presbyterian Church. And then we have Thyatira, the Methodist, from 1703 AD to 1791. And we have the Baptist from 1827 Baptist Church to 1833, and then we have the Millerites from 1833 to 1844. Now, so it is very important, brothers and sisters, to understand this prophecy so that we could definitely point out what church that had been paganized by the dragon. So we need to ascertain clearly what church that had been paganized by the dragon during the dark ages of religion. We are studying, brothers and sisters, the woman in the New Testament division. And we already read in 2SR page 76 that there are only 3 divisions of the woman in the New Testament division. The apostolic period, then the woman during the dark ages, and then the third and the last period of the woman, when the woman will be in conflict with the dragon. Now, concerning the first period of the woman, the shepherd's rod made it so plain, so I would like to read. In answerer number 2, on page 10, it says, as a result of persecuting the woman, Satan was, ironically, only helping rather than hindering the divine purpose. Indeed, the church field, Matthew 13 verse 38, grow only pure wheat, the net, verse 47. Caught only good fish, because against such persecution, only the faithful dared to take their stand for truth and to become members of the hated sect. Answerer number 2, page 10. Now, this reading plainly telling us that the entire period of the first division of the woman, the devil completely failed to paganize the church. He had not been able to paganize the church according to the reading because only pure wit dared to join that hated sect. So, from 27 AD to 100 AD, the church remained pure, brothers and sisters. Now, let us read this statement in tract number 3. On tract number 3, page 60 and page 61. It says, the evil of allowing the devil freely to sow the tares among the wheat has existed in the Christian church since the passing of the apostles, with the result that whenever the Lord has sent a message to his people, the tares among them have straightway, at the instructions of the leaders, raised their hands and voted out whoever would listen to the messenger and obey the message, thus time and again selling their birthright for less than a mess of pottage. The professed people of God have lost out, and still the church has never learned the tragic lesson. And it says in the last paragraph, as the period since the passing of the apostles has been the wheat and tare growing time, and as, moreover, the Laodicean church is the last of the 7 sections of the Christian church in which are commingled the wheat and the tares, we must learn the answer to the question. But that is not our subject. Our subject first is pointing to the first division of the woman. That the devil have no chance to sow his devilish seed to the apostolic church as long as the apostles are still living. That is the statement given by the voice of inspiration. And that is the significance of the parables of Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 13. Now let us go to Matthew chapter 13. It says here on verse 25, but while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. So, this parable, but while men slept, pointing to the time when the heavenly confounder retired to their graves. When the heavenly confounder died, the movement that they founded, according to the shepherd's rod, fall into the hands of uninspired men, or the shepherd's rod called it foolish foolish shepherds. 3 symbolic code, 11 to 12, page 10. 3 symbolic code, 11 to 12, page 10. It says, moreover, after the death of its reformer, the churches which they founded fell into the hands of foolish shepherds, who were reaching out after numbers rather than after real converts. Thus, as they flooded the churches with worldlings, they caused her to backslide after its forward step, with the consequence that the Lord has had to shift the responsibilities from the old leadership to a new one in its call of reformation. And here in 2SR, it says, let us read the statement from 103 and 104 in 2SR. It says, the early Christian church, in like manner, was dragged into the dark ages as soon as the apostles passed away. Satan marshaled his agents, men of renown, into the church. The already blinded leaders laid their hands on men, not from the viewpoint of consecration, but from distinction, and thus made them shepherds of the flock. In the darkest hour of the Christian church, God, by the hand of Luther, called the attention of the multitude to the terrible deception. But few were ready to listen to the humble monk. One would imagine that the most intellectual would have been the first to see the light in the plain, thus said the Lord. Luther, with a great struggle, and at the risk of his life, founded the Lutheran denomination. But as he passed away, that movement, in like manner, was corrupted and hardened against new light on the Word of God. Now, here in page 104, the continuation, it says, as John Knox came with additional truth, the leaders of the church, the leaders of the Lutheran church, refused to be interested. Thus, necessity gave birth to the Presbyterian denomination. So the leaders mentioned here is the uninspired leadership. That is what it means in answerer number 1 on page 65. It says, thus we see that the Reformation, which originally under the direction of inspired men, lifted the church out of one morass, later, under the direction of uninspired men, plunged her into another, wherein she has been plundering ever since. And unless we let the truth extricate us from this fatal vague of confusion, we cannot defeat the enemy of inspiration in his tireless and powerful efforts to pervert the implements of our salvation into weapons for our destruction. Answerer number 1, page 65. Now, let us go back again into SR page 104. As John Knox came with additional truth, the leaders of the church, the Lutheran church, refused to be interested. And that leaders are the uninspired leaders who took over the Lutheran denomination after Martin Luther died. And it says, thus necessity gave birth to the Presbyterian denomination. These experiences had been repeated with Wesley Campbell, Miller, and White. And of course, B.T. Hotep would not include himself in this reading because he was still living in that period of time. But the argument given by B.T. Hotep must be also applied after B.T. Hotep died, brothers and sisters, that these experiences will be repeated with the Davidian when B.T. Hotep died, brothers and sisters. So it says here, we have far more to fear from within than from without. The hindrances to strength and success are far greater from the church itself than from the world. If the danger against the church has been from within, through confidence in self-deceived leadership in every age, what would change things at the present time? So, here in 1 SR 220, it says here in 1 SR page 220, I would like to read this reading. It says, God has the same prophecy confirmed by the prophet Ezekiel and carried out by the reformers since Luther's time. Namely, Luther, Knox, Wesley, Campbell, Miller, and Sister White. These godly men sacrificed all in an effort to lead God's church back to her standard of purity. But as the shrewd enemy succeeded to pull down the first, he proceeded to use the same method to the last. 1 SR 220. What is that method? The method was portrayed in the parables of Jesus Christ in Matthew 13, verse 25, that when the servant is sleeping, that is the opportune time that the devil sow his devilish seed to that field which is under the direction of God's inspired servant. And that is why B.T. Hotep says that there was no such immunization, brothers and sisters, because the words of Christ can never be mistaken. Here in 2SR page 95, it says, the 7 heads are to symbolically point out these high places ruled by unsanctified leaders who have attempted to mix the sacred with the common and refused to hear the word of the Lord. The biblical number 7, denoting completeness, naturally would comprise all Christendom at the time the prophetic truth is made known. Such apostasy is not a strange thing in the history of God's people, for time and again, the church has fallen under a satanic flood. In Luther's day, conditions were as bad as when the church crucified Christ. If this generation is more wicked than any before, what would immunize the church from just such an apostasy? It is accepted by most Bible students that prophecies of this nature are understood only when the prophetic object in view is fully developed. Therefore, this is the time in which the symbols speak. However, there is another angle to this by which we shall prove that the facts presented are true. But this statement is more definitely applied in our days rather than in the days of B.T. Hotep. Now let us go back again to our main target. Brothers and sisters, we already explained that on the first division of the woman in the New Testament period, which is the Apostolic Church, the devil had not been able to sow the devilish seed, which is the tares, to that church because the apostle lived the entire period of the apostolic church from 27 AD to 100 AD. And we know that the last apostle who died is John the Beloved in 100 AD. So, the Shepherd's Rod says that with the passing of the apostles in tract number 3, page 60 and 61, that is the time that the devil been able to sow the devil seed. Brothers and sisters, he had been able to sow the devil seed. But what church that the devil had been able to sow his devil seed? So we need to study closely. Is it the woman? Now, here in tract number 12, on page 43, let us read. To begin with, we see from this scripture that the woman left her vineyard, homeland Palestine, and went into the Gentile world after her child was born. That is, in her Christian period, when the dragon persecuted her through the instrumentality of the Jews. Acts chapter 8, verse 1, Acts 13, 46 and 50 and 51. Next, we see that after she was there for some time, conditions become such to hinder her longer nourishing herself, and that it therefore became necessary that she be nourished by someone for a time and times and half a time. So here in this reading, the voice of inspiration is plainly telling that the woman, brothers and sisters, left the vineyard. But I think there's a statement that says that the woman left the vineyard after the resurrection. Can you find that statement? It is after the resurrection. There's a statement in the Shepherd's Rod. The woman left the vineyard after the resurrection. I think that is the statement. You find the statement. Okay, track number 15, page 84. So I would like to read that reading. It says, since a wilderness is just the opposite of a vineyard, the statement that she might fly into the wilderness emphatically implies that she must have left the vineyard. And that is precisely what she did. Shortly after the resurrection, the church, the woman, left the Holy Land, the vineyard, and went to the land of the Gentiles, the wilderness. Now, the voice of inspiration made it so plain. Is there no other statement beside this statement? It says that she left the vineyard after the resurrection, brothers and sisters, according to the voice of inspiration. Now, that statement, brothers and sisters, in going back again to track number 12, on page 43, I would like to go back again to that reading. Track number 12, on page 43. It says here, let's read track number 12, page 43. Next we see that, that after she was there for some time, conditions became such as to hinder her longer nourishing herself, and that it therefore became necessary that she be nourished by someone for a time and times and half a time. And who is this someone? For sure it is Jesus Christ. I would like to read the last part of the next paragraph. So had he not nourished her, so the pronoun he mentioned here, it is the Lord Jesus Christ. So had he not nourished her, keep her in existence by a miracle, and we know only God can perform a miracle, the church would have perished during those dark ages of religion. Now, brothers and sisters, I would like to quote that statement that one truth dovetailing another, or one subject. Let me read to you. Track number 5, on page 38. It says, going on now to understand the symbolism as it does basically defines itself, the student will see as he proceeds that its subject not only becomes clearer and clearer, one truth dovetailing with another and all reinforcing the whole, but also that it holds a steering present truth lesson. Track number 5, page 38. Now, since the focal point of Revelation chapter 12 is the man-child, the woman and the man-child, which by virtue of facts, it points out to Jesus Christ, right? We already read in answerer number 2, page 45. And also in track number 14, on page 32, saying, in amplification of this cluster of events, several facts stand out in unmistakable self-interpretation. Emmanuel, by virtue of his virgin birth and his name, God with us, Matthew 1 verse 23, can only be Christ with us. So this man-child is none other than Emmanuel, which is the Son of the living God, brothers and sisters. Now let us view first to the birth of Jesus Christ. Here in 2SR, on page 100, let me read here. Page 100. That according to the Shepherd's Rod, brothers and sisters, 129, it says, the woman is a symbol of God's church. The crown of 12 stars is her authority or government. The 12 apostles and the child is Christ. In the 9th verse, we are told that the dragon is the devil and Satan. It was under the figure of Herod that the dragon stood before the woman, ready to devour her child as soon as it was born. And we know that according to the Bible in Matthew chapter 2, I would like to um, read Matthew chapter 2. Let's read the statement here. It says, this is the statement given by verse 7. It says, Matthew chapter 2, verse 7. Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. And we know that is not the reality, brothers and sisters, because the desire of Herod is to kill the child. And we know that Herod is under the dictation of the red dragon. Now, I would like to just to relate the occurrence of the first advent of Jesus Christ. According to Testimonies for the Church, volume 5, on page 728, it says here, volume 5, page 728, the Jews were looking for the Messiah, but he did not come as they had predicted that he would. So what is their prediction concerning the Messiah that would come? They were looking for the Messiah. But the Messiah that they predicted, their basis is Isaiah 24:23 and Psalm 72, verse 8. Now let us read here in Desire of Ages 458. It says, Many who were convinced that Jesus was the Son of God were misled by the false reasoning of the priests and rabbis. These teachers had repeated with great effect the prophecies concerning the Messiah, that he would reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and before his ancients gloriously, that he would have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. Isaiah 24, verse 23. Psalm 72, verse 8. Then they made contemptuous comparisons between the glory here pictured and the humble appearance of Jesus. The very words of prophecy were superverted as to sanction error. Had the people in sincerity studied the word for themselves, they would not have been misled. The 61st chapter of Isaiah testifies that Christ was to do the very work he did. Chapter 53 sets forth his rejection and sufferings in the world. And chapter 59 describes the character of the priests and rabbis. Desire of Ages, page 458. Now, this is the whole story, brothers and sisters. We know that the Jews, the scribes, the Pharisees, or the rulers in the Jewish nation, all of them had been guided and inspired by Satan to twist the predicted event of the arrival of the Messiah. Brothers and sisters, and if you still remember, in the Desire of Ages, page 115, it says here, when God's written word was given, Satan studied the prophecies of the Savior's advent. From generation to generation, he worked to blind the people to these prophecies that they might reject Christ at His coming. It says, at the birth of Jesus, Satan knew that one had come with a divine commission to dispute His dominion. He trembled at the angel's message, attesting the authority of the newborn king. Satan well knew the position that Christ had held in heaven as the beloved of the Father. That the Son of God should come to this earth as a man filled him with amazement and with apprehension. He could not fathom the mystery of this great sacrifice. Now here, brothers and sisters, the spur prophecy is plainly telling us that the devil knoweth, brothers and sisters, concerning the birth of the Messiah. The devil knew that Jesus Christ will be born in Bethlehem. But in order for the entire Jewish nation to reject the Savior at His first advent, He inspired the rulers, the Jewish nation, under His dictation. And the illustration given in the Bible that the red dragon has 7 heads, indicating that all the religious system, brothers and sisters, in the days of Christ, at His first advent, is under control of the devil, according to 2SR page 69. I would like to read the statement. The heads, 2SR page 69. It says, the heads are represented by the biblical number 7, meaning completeness, and embrace every religious system in the days of Christ. 2SR page 69. The heads are represented by the biblical number 7, meaning completeness, and embrace every religious system in the days of Christ. And try to imagine what happened to Satan. He is the one who guided the minds and the thoughts of these people that the Messiah would be born in the palace. Brothers and sisters, as we read in Desire of Ages 458, and their basis is Isaiah 24, verse 23, and Psalm 72, verse 8. And that is why, here in Volume 5, 728, it says, the Jews were looking for the Messiah, but He did not come as they had predicted that He would. So, and it says, and if He were accepted as the promised one, their learned teachers would be forced to acknowledge that they had erred. Volume 5, page 728. And we know the prime mover of these occurrences is the devil, the red dragon. Now, it comes the time, the very year, brothers and sisters, that the Messiah would be born, and the devil is acquainted with such absolute fact. He also the one who inspired King Herod, brothers and sisters, to when King Herod give message to the 3 wise men, according to the Bible in Matthew chapter 2. I would like to begin on verse 1. Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for that it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not thou less among the princes of Judah? For out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child. And when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. And we know that Herod is not telling the truth, because his desire is to kill the child. And that's why in verse 12, 13, and 14, God commanded Joseph and Mary not to go back to Jerusalem, but rather to depart and go into Egypt, brothers and sisters. So, in these occurrences, let us go back again to the statement into our page 129. It says, The woman is a symbol of God's church. The crown of 12 stars is her authority or government. The 12 apostles, and the child is Christ. In the 9th verse, we are told that the dragon is the devil and Satan. It was under the figure of Herod that the dragon stood before the woman, ready to devour her child as soon as it was born. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee a word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So these occurrences in the first advent of Jesus Christ is also illustrated by the seed of the woman, brothers and sisters. The reason that God commanded the seed of the woman to depart from Jerusalem, because at that time, Jerusalem became the dragon's headquarters. Now, let us read again track number 15 on page 85 and page 86. It says, Unquestionably, therefore, the wilderness where the woman was nourished for the time being is the land of the Gentiles. And the woman, having to flee from the face of the serpent in her homeland, shows that the dragon had made the Holy Land his headquarters. Not satisfied with this, though he even followed her into the wilderness. So this reading in track number 15, page 85 and page 86, plainly telling us, my dear brothers and sisters, that the main objective of the red dragon is to destroy and kill the woman. On the first division, the woman, the goal of the dragon is to destroy and kill Jesus Christ, the man-child. And the illustration is that the dragon is waiting Jesus Christ to be born. Because the devil has a vehement hatred against the Son of the living God. And that is why it was illustrated in early writings accordingly on page 100. Let us read again. On page early writings, page 100. This is the statement in page 160. It says, Satan and his angels blinded the eyes and darkened the understanding of the Jews. No, this is not the... that is the proof that it is Satan who blinded their eyes so that instead of waiting for Jesus Christ to be born on Bethlehem, they are waiting Jesus Christ to be born on the palace. But this is the reading that I would like to read. Early Writings 152. Satan again rejoiced with his angels that he could, by causing man's fall down the Son of God from his exalted position. He told his angels that when Jesus should take fallen man's nature, he could overpower him and hinder the accomplishment of the plan of salvation. Early Writings 152. So, the devil, Satan, he already guaranteed, gave an assurance to the fallen angels, his followers, his sympathizers, that after he had been able to successfully lead Adam and Eve to disobey God, after Adam and Eve were fallen into sin, Satan already cognizant to the fact that the Son of the living God will came to this earth to save the fallen nature of man, but the Son of the living God will come to this earth in a human sinful nature. Brothers and sisters. And because of that situation, and because of that condition, Satan already gave the word. He guaranteed all his angels that he will win. He could be able to overcome the Son of the living God. And that is the reason that God showed to John in the island of Patmos concerning the symbolization of the red dragon on the first advent of Jesus Christ as the primary application of Revelation chapter 12, that in that period of time, Satan has no intention to kill the woman. Because his main objective is the Son of the living God, brothers and sisters, that will come to this earth in a human nature. And he is watching. And he is very certain that when that Son of the living God will come to this earth in a human nature, he will win and he will obtain the victory. But we know that he was completely defeated. But what I'm trying to emphasize that it was illustrated that the first goal of the devil is not to kill the woman, but rather to kill the child. And he need, because of his vehement hatred against Jesus Christ in heaven, and he want to, at least according to him, that when Jesus Christ will come to this earth in a human nature, at last he will be the winner. So his intention is not to kill the woman, but to wait that child to be born. But after Jesus Christ was born on his first advent, the intention of the dragon is no longer the same. Because the intention of the dragon is to kill the woman, to destroy the woman, so that if possible, that predicted event, brothers and sisters, because he understand that Revelation chapter 12 had not been fully fulfilled on the first advent of Jesus Christ. Because the description in the Bible, he will rule the whole world or all nations with the rod of iron, and he will sit on the throne of David. He will sit on the throne of glory. All those predicted events never been materialized on the first advent of Jesus Christ. So Satan knew that there is still another fulfillment of Revelation chapter 12, brothers and sisters. And his intention now is opposite. His intention is to kill the woman, to destroy the woman, so that the woman could not deliver that predicted child, brothers and sisters. Now, let us go back again to the dark ages of religion. The shepherd's rod declared clearly that the child need to be rescued. The same what happened to Jesus Christ. If the instruments of the devil on the first advent of Jesus Christ is King Herod or the pagan Rome, as stated on the Great Controversy on page 438. Let us read again. The Great Controversy. 438, saying, the line of prophecy in which these symbols are found begins with Revelation chapter 12, with the dragon that sought to destroy Christ at his birth. The dragon is said to be Satan. The dragon is said to be Satan. Revelation 12 verse 9. He it was that moved upon Herod to put the Savior to death. But the chief agent of Satan in making war upon Christ and his people during the first centuries of the Christian era was the Roman Empire, in which paganism was the prevailing religion. Thus, while the dragon primarily represents Satan, it is in a secondary sense a symbol of pagan Rome. The Great Controversy, page 438. And here in 2SR, on page 88 and page 89, it says, the crowns represent civil authority, as previously explained. Had they been on the heads, like on the dragon of Revelation 12 verse 3, it would denote that the churches are using the civil arm of the state to propagate their dogma, as in the days of imperial and papal Rome, represented by the dragon. Now, we already explained that the shepherd's rod is very plain that that event, church and state system or religious political system, cannot be symbolized but by any of the beasts from the procession of the beast, but only in the representation of the red dragon. And here the shepherd's rod is plainly telling us that the church and state system on the first period of the exceeding great horn, pagan Rome, and the church and state system during the period of papal Rome, by which the churches or the religious system are using the civil arm of the state to propagate their dogma, is represented by the dragon. 2SR page 88 and page 89, brothers and sisters. But I would like to emphasize, brothers and sisters, that the occurrence in the Dark Ages was connected by the shepherd's rod to the study of the Syrian Confederacy. Now, let me read to you here in track number 14. In track number 14, on page 32 and page 33, let us read this reading and hoping that we could comprehend the truth that had been portrayed in these pages. The high points of this confederacy, some of which are still unfulfilled, fall into sequence thusly. So these four enumerations, all of them are still unfulfilled. And it says, number 1, the overthrow of both ancient Israel and Syria by ancient Assyria as a divine judgment, especially upon Israel for confederating against her own brethren, the kingdom of Judah. Isaiah 7, verse 2-9. The birth of a man-child, Emmanuel, to a virgin, for a sign to the house of David. Isaiah 7, verse 13 and 14. And that is one of our main subjects. The birth of a man-child. And this birth of a man-child, recorded in Isaiah 7, verse 13 and verse 14, we know that on its primary phase, points to the birth of Jesus Christ in Bethlehem. And the virgin birth of Jesus Christ cannot be applied to symbolical, but rather only to literal. Because if it is symbolical, the mother of Jesus Christ who gave birth to him is the Jewish church, according to SR page 72. But the fact is, the Jewish church at that time is not a virgin, but rather a harlot, according to Great Controversy, page 383. And in 2SR, that was in 63 BC. before the Roman monarchy came to that throne. And the reason that the Roman monarchy had been able to establish the throne, it's so because the transgressors came to the full. And it says here in the Great Controversy 383, it was by departure from the Lord in alliance with the heathen that the Jewish church became a harlot, and Rome, corrupting herself in like manner by seeking the support of worldly powers, receives a like condemnation. The Great Controversy, page 383. So the only portion on the birth of Christ by which it is a virgin birth, it is literal. Because when his mother, Mary, began to conceive Jesus Christ, at that time, Mary was still in her virginity. Joseph did not touch Mary as yet. But Isaiah 7 verse 13 and 14 and 15 is not literal, but symbolical prophecy. And that's why it is still unfulfilled, brothers and sisters. And for sure, that is the fulfillment of that child in Revelation 12:13. The child mentioned here in tract number 14, by which the shepherd's rod plainly told us in answerer number 2, page 45, that the church mentioned in Revelation chapter 12, verse 13, must be the church in the Christian era. Brothers and sisters, it must be the church in the Christian era, and not the first advent of Jesus Christ. Now, let's read tract number 14, page 32 and page 33. And third, the birth of a son, Maher-shalal Hasbaz, to the prophet himself, for signs and for wonders in Israel. Isaiah 8 verse 18. The overthrow of Israel to occur before Emmanuel could learn to differentiate evil from good, and before Maher-shalal Hasbaz could say, my father and my mother, Isaiah 7 verse 16 and Isaiah 8 verse 4. In amplification of this cluster of events, several facts stand out in unmistakable self-interpretation. Number 1, Emmanuel, by virtue of his virgin birth and his name, God with us, Matthew 1 verse 23, can only be Christ with us. He was born for a sign that the unholy alliance between Israel and Syria was to come to naught. Number 3, the lands of Israel and Syria, which Judah abhorred, were to be forsaken of both their kings, conquered by the king of Assyria. Before Emmanuel was to be able to refuse evil and choose good, and before Maher-shalal Hasbaz was to be able to say, my father and my mother. So, Emmanuel, he could already be able to say, my mother and my father, but he could not as yet be able to refuse the evil and choose the good. But Maher-shalal Hasbaz cannot even say, my father and my mother, or Maher-shalal Hasbaz do not as yet that capacity to recognize who is his father and who is his mother. And then it says, but the simple historical fact that these two kingdoms were overthrown centuries before Emmanuel was even born brings a time discrepancy which can be reconciled only by the conclusion that all four nations, Judah, Israel, and Syria and Assyria, involved in this historical action were typical of four others that were to arise sometime following Emmanuel's birth. For after his birth, Israel and Syria were to be conquered by Assyria. So this confederacy will be fulfilled after the birth of Emmanuel, and at the time when Emmanuel could be able to acknowledge who is his father and who is his mother, but still, he has no capacity as yet to refuse the evil and choose the good. So, the only capacity of Emmanuel is, or his intellectual capacity is only to acknowledge who is his father and who is his mother. So, that is the Emmanuel mentioned here. And if that Emmanuel is Jesus Christ, then the application in the Old Testament cannot be the perfect fulfillment because there is a time discrepancy. The confederacy occurred before Emmanuel was born. But the application also made by Eph during the Dark Ages cannot be the perfect fulfillment of the prophecy because no one could say that even during the Dark Ages, Jesus Christ could not as yet able to refuse the evil and choose the good. While at this time, Jesus Christ was already in the heavenly sanctuary. Now let us read the next paragraph in page 33. Necessarily, then, there must be found in the Christian dispensation a backslidden Christian power, Israel. So, it points out to the backslidden Christian power, Israel, or the 10 tribes, confederated with a pagan one, Syria, to the end of assimilating or annihilating the Orthodox Christians, Judah. And the only such confederacy in the Christian era was the unholy union of church and state which ruled during the Dark Ages and which sought to the destruction of the born again who refused to depart from the apostolic faith and submit to a Christian pagan, Israel-Syrian confederacy. Now, brothers and sisters, to understand this occurrence during the Dark Ages, we need to study first the groundwork. We know that the 10 tribes, and I would like to emphasize this clearly, brothers and sisters. We know that the 10 tribes confederated to Syria to attack Judah. But according to the Bible, I would like to read here on Isaiah chapter 7. Let's read. Isaiah chapter 7 and verse 1 and verse 2. And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem, toward against it, but could not prevail against it. So, the Bible made it so plain here in Isaiah 7 verse 1 that when the 10 tribes and Syria confederated together to attack Judah without the knowledge of King Ahaz. He did not know that in reality, the confederacy of the 10 tribes and Syria, they could not be able to enter the territory of Judah. And we know that that is under divine protection of the Lord, brothers and sisters. But what happened? Brothers and sisters, what happened? Majority of those who followed King Ahaz, they go to Assyria for protection. Because according to the Bible, let us read this reading in Prophets and Kings, brothers and sisters, in page 300. Let us read. Page 328 and 329. Had Ahaz, Prophets and Kings, page 328, it says, had Ahaz and the chief men of his realm been true servants of the Most High, they would have had no fear of so unnatural an alliance as had been formed against them. But repeated transgression had shown them of strength, stricken with a nameless dread of the retributive judgments of an offended God. The heart of the king was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. Isaiah 7 verse 2. In this crisis, the word of the Lord came to Isaiah, bidding him meet the trembling king and say, take heed and be quiet, fear not, neither be faint-hearted, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, let us go up against Judah and vex it, and let us make a breach therein for us, and set a king in the midst of it. Thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. The prophet declared that the kingdom of Israel and Syria as well would soon come to an end. If you will not believe, he concluded, surely ye shall not be established. Well, would it have been for the kingdom of Judah, had Ahaz received this message as from heaven, but choosing to lean on the arm of flesh, he sought help from the heathen. In desperation, he sent word to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and then said, I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Syria and out of the hand of the king of Israel, which rise up against me. 2 Kings 16, verse 7. The request was accompanied by a rich present from the king's treasure and from the temple's storehouse. Prophets and Kings 328 and page 329. So, majority, brothers and sisters, at that time, followed the king and then go to Assyria. Now, let us go back to the antitypical fulfillment during the dark ages of religion. And I would like to read track number 12, then go back to that reading in track number 14. In track number 12, page 43, let us read. It says here, to begin with, we see from this scripture that the woman left her vineyard, homeland, Palestine, and went into the Gentile world after her child was born. That is, in her Christian period, when the dragon persecuted her through the instrumentality of the Jews. Acts chapter 8, verse 1. Acts 13:46, verse 50 and 51. Next, we see that after she was there for some time, conditions become such as to hinder her longer nourishing herself. It says, and that it therefore became necessary that she be nourished by someone for a time and times and half a time. 3.5 years after Christ's resurrection, the church left Palestine vineyard. So that is 34 AD. So in 34 AD, the church left Palestine vineyard. The church mentioned here could not be the apostolic church because all of them died in Jerusalem. Brothers and sisters. So the church mentioned here, that's why we need to study closely concerning the church. The church mentioned here must be the Ephesus. The second section of the early Christian church, because the early Christian church is divided into two sections. The first section is the apostolic church, and the second section is the Ephesus. And that is called, both of them are called the early Christian church. The early Christian church is divided into two sections. The first section is the apostolic church. The apostolic church, that is the second candlestick of Revelation 11:3. Whereas the second section of the early Christian church is the Ephesus. The Ephesus is the first candlestick of Revelation chapter 1 verse 20. So, that is the difference. And the first section of the early Christian church, they did not left Palestine. All of them died in Palestine. And it was illustrated on Zechariah chapter 6. The reason that there is no destination of the red. So let us connect to Zechariah chapter 6 in 2TG22. 2TG22, page 22, it says, since the church, 2TG22, page 22, since the church originated in Asia, Jerusalem in particular, the first chariot is seen to have remained there, for it went nowhere. But we already explained, brothers and sisters, why is it that God uses a pair of horses in his chariot? I would like to give a short explanation first concerning Zechariah chapter 6. Let us see the chart in Zechariah chapter 6. So, here, brothers and sisters, on Zechariah chapter 6, the first chariot, there are two horses. Also, the second chariot, there are two horses. The third chariot, there are two horses. Only the fourth chariot, that there are two pair of horses. But we already explained on other subject concerning the 144,000 going out of Egypt. The reason that God places two horses in his chariot to let us know that this chariot is divided into two sections. This first chariot is the early Christian church. And the first section is the apostolic church. Although both of them had been martyred for their faith, brothers and sisters, because they were represented by the red horses. Now, why is it that God did not place a specific location of this first chariot? Unlike with the second, go to the north country, the third, go to the north country, the fourth one, go to the south country. The reason is that this first chariot, pertaining to the first section, the reason that they have no destination because all of them died in Jerusalem. They did not left the vineyard. But how about the second section of the early Christian church? Because they left the vineyard. According to a reading, in 34 AD, they left the vineyard. The significance that there is no destination is that Jesus Christ hidden them in the wilderness and nobody knows the location of the woman. And that is the significance, brothers and sisters. That is the significance that when the 10 tribes and Syria confederated together and they attacked Judah, but they could not prevail against it. Now, during the Dark Ages, the significance is that the 10 tribes, brothers and sisters, pointing to the majority of the Christians, the majority of the membership of the early Christian church, the Ephesus, they confederated to antitypical Syria, which is the Catholics, or paganism. And their purpose is to find the location of the woman, represented by Judah. And the significance that they could not prevail against it, they could not found the location of the woman because she was hidden by Jesus Christ miraculously. Now, I would like to read again tract number 12, page 43 and page 44. 3.5 years after Christ's resurrection, therefore 34 AD, the church left Palestine vineyard, and while she was in the Gentile world wilderness, the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman. So when the woman was in the wilderness, the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, forced the heathen to be baptized into Christianity and to join the church, that he might cause her to be carried away, heathenized, of the flood. Verse 15. While thus flooded, she had to be nourished, sustained by the Lord. So it is the Lord that sustained her, because many of her followers were heathenized, and nearly all of those who were not were carried to death by the flood. So had he not nourished her, keep her in existence by a miracle, the church would have perished during those dark ages of religion. Now, let us try to elaborate this statement, saying that there are two classes mentioned here, brothers and sisters. But I would like to use the term that supposed to be. I would like to use the term supposed to be. The 10 tribes. the 10 tribes, which is pointing to the majority of the Christians, their existence, supposed to be, I would like to use the term supposed to be, is to protect the woman. Brothers and sisters. But what happened to them? They were defeated by the devil, heathenized, paganized. And according to the voice of inspiration, it says, there are some by which the dragon have not been able to paganize them, but they were carried to death by the flood. It says, and nearly all of those who were not paganized, were carried to death by the flood. So here, brothers and sisters, the statement carried away, because that is the statement in Revelation 12:15. Let us go to Revelation 12, verse 15. Revelation chapter 12, verse 15. It says here, and the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. So this statement, to be carried away of the flood, during the dark ages of religion, there are two significance. To repeat again, that statement in Revelation 12, verse 15, to be carried away during the dark ages of religion, there are two significance. The first significance is to paganize them. And the second significance is they were martyred for their faith. Now, before elaborating, I would like to read first track number 12 on page 'I think that is from page, let me see if we could find a statement. That according to the shepherd's rod, that the, in Daniel chapter 11, saying that he will begin with, I forget the term. Let us read first Daniel chapter 11. The term used, is it little people? Or Daniel chapter 11. And according to Daniel chapter 11, small people. Daniel 11 verse 23. Daniel 11 verse 23. And let us read the statement given by the shepherd's rod. Track number 12. Let me see. 60 and 67. Now here in track number 12, that small people in Daniel chapter 11, according to the shepherd's rod, they are the unfaithful. I think that is the statement. They are not the faithful, brothers and sisters, according to the shepherd's rod. Can you find that statement? The small people, they were the unfaithful. I forget the statement. In track number 12. B.T. Hotep says that the small people by which Rome, that is they were the unfaithful. Track number 12, page 80. Let me see. So let's read the statement. The king of the north, having intelligence only with those who did forsake the holy covenant, clears 2 points. First, that all did not forsake the Sabbath. Second, that the small people with whom he became strong were not the faithful followers of Christ, but the unfaithful ones. Track number 12, page 80. And they are those, brothers and sisters, when Apostle Paul says that in his days, Apostle Paul already noticed these people who joined the church, creeping into the church. I would like to read this reading in the Great Controversy. On page 49. The Great Controversy, page 49. It says, the Apostle Paul, in his second letter to the Thessalonians, foretold the great apostasy which would result in the establishment of the papal power. He declared that the day of Christ should not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposed and exalted himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And furthermore, the apostle warns his brethren that the mystery of iniquity that already worked, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, verse 4 and 7. Even that early date he saw, creeping into the church, errors that would prepare the way for the development of the papacy. What are those errors? Now, I would like to read this reading in the Great Controversy, I think 386. The Great Controversy, 386. It says here. So, let's read this reading. Let me see if I can find a statement saying, but what was the origin, 385. But what was the origin of the great apostasy? Remember, the great apostasy is found in page 49, if you still remember that reading, right? Let us read. Again, the Great Controversy, page 49. The Apostle Paul, in his second letter to the Thessalonians, foretold the great apostasy, which would result the establishment of the papal power. Now, here in the Great Controversy, 384 and 385, what was the origin of the great apostasy? How did the church first depart from the simplicity of the gospel? By conforming to the practices of paganism to facilitate the acceptance of Christianity by the heathen. The Apostle Paul declared even in his day, the mystery of iniquity that already worked, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7. During the lives of the apostles, the church remained comparatively pure. So we have another proof that the apostolic church remained pure in the entire period from 27 AD to 100 AD. And it says, but toward the latter end of the 2nd century, most of the churches assumed a new form. The first simplicity disappeared, and insensibly, as the old disciples retired to their graves, so when all of them already dead, the apostles, their children, or the children of the apostles, along with new converts, came forward and new modeled the cause. So they now modeled the cause. Brothers and sisters, or the cause of the gospel. To secure converts, the exalted standard of the Christian faith was lowered. And as the result, a pagan flood flowing into the church carried with its customs, practices, and idols. That is the statement. Great Controversy, page 384. Brothers and sisters. What is the origin of the great apostasy? By which Apostle Paul already seen while he was still alive. And the same with Moses. When Moses was still alive, God already gave him the vision. God already shown to Apostle Paul that in order to secure converts, they will lower the standard. And that is the reason that thousands upon thousands entered to Christianity, brothers and sisters. Because of lowering the standard. Now, we already read that predicted event in Daniel 11, verse 24. The small people there, which points out to the Christians, is pointing to the unfaithful, not to the faithful. So the shepherd is plainly telling us that there are two significance of that verse in Revelation 12:15 to be carried away. The first significance is that to the unfaithful, they became pagans, or their lives had been paganized or heathenized. Their lives had been corrupted. But those faithful who remained loyal to the apostolic faith, brothers and sisters, they sacrificed their lives. They sacrificed their lives, brothers and sisters, in order to protect the Christian faith. But those who sacrificed their lives and those that had been heathenized, brothers and sisters, they were not the woman. Because the woman was hidden by God during the dark ages. And that's what it means that during the dark ages of religion, brothers and sisters, the significance of wilderness is that she was out of civilization. So let us read again. 2SR page 261. It says, 2SR 261. The wilderness represents the dark ages in which time she was out of civilization. 538 AD to 1798 AD. What does it mean, out of civilization? They were not reckoned among the nations. Brothers and sisters, and I think that is the partial fulfillment of Numbers 23 verse 9, because they were not reckoned among the nations. They were out of civilization during the dark ages of religion. And the statement in 2SR page 268, I would like to read to you. In 2SR 266 rather, it says, the question before us is, when will the antitype meet its perfect fulfillment? In the preceding paragraphs, it was explained that the first section of the Christian church ended in 538 AD. What does it mean that the first section of the early Christian church ended in 538 AD? What does it mean by ended? In the illustration of the literal temple, it says here in 271 in 2SR, as type destroyed type, so antitype must have destroyed antitype. That is, ancient Babylon, the type of the papacy, robbed and destroyed Solomon's temple, the type of the early Christian church, and led Israel into captivity. This symbolical prophecy meets its perfect fulfillment in 538 AD, when the papacy went forth and destroyed the church, the Christian church, robbed them of the truth, and led the followers of Christ into captivity, subject to papal rule. 2SR page 271. Now, brothers and sisters, so in 538 AD, the word ended when it comes to the faithful. All of them were already dead. All the constituent of the faithful of the Ephesus were already dead. And the unfaithful that flooded to the church, they joined confederating to Syria. And what is antitypical Syria? The Catholics. So the unfaithful, they were now confederating each other to find the location of the woman. But God sent little help. And who are they, the little help? That is the four great denominations. The four great denominations, they were not categorized or called by the shepherd's rod as woman. That is very plain. Therefore, brothers and sisters, here in 2SR page 268, it says, the foregoing explanation answers one of our questions. The Protestant churches which were raised up before the woman returned from the wilderness were in total darkness concerning the sanctuary service. Therefore, they are not represented by the woman or by the temple. So these four great denominations can never be categorized as woman or temple. In 267, let me read to you. It says, 2SR 267, if the accepted interpretation of the woman is a symbol of the church, and if she was in the wilderness from 538 AD to 1798 AD, what about the four great denominations that were raised up prior to that time? Brothers and sisters, who are they, the great denominations that were raised up prior to that time? If we will be talking about Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, the Lutherans had been raised up in 1500 AD. Now, the shepherd's rod says, how about the four great denominations that were raised up prior to that time? The shepherd's rod already answered. It says, the foregoing explanation answers one of our questions. Only one. What is the question that had been answered in 268? The question, how about the four great denominations? Are they called woman? So it is answered here in 268. No, they are not called woman. Because they were in total darkness concerning the Sabbath and the sanctuary truth. Therefore, they cannot be called woman. Who are they then? They are the little help. Predicted in Daniel 11, verse 33 and verse 34. Is stated in tract number 12. track number 12 on page 80. It says, now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help. Many shall cleave to them with flatteries. Verse 33 and verse 34. So, there are three entities mentioned in these verses 33 and 34. First, who are they that shall fall? We already read, right, in 2SR 266. In 538 AD, all the faithful constituent of the Ephesus were ended. All of them were already dead. And who are they saying? But many shall cleave to them with flatteries. They were the unfaithful. Because of the flatteries, they had been conquered by the scheme of the devil. But who are they, the little help? The Reformation. Why is it that God raised up the little help? Because majority of the constituent of the Ephesus already conquered by the devil. And the faithful, all of them were already dead. Therefore, nobody could protect the woman at that time. And that is why it was predicted beforehand, the Reformation. Indicating that after the Ephesus then came up, brothers and sisters, the Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodists, and Baptists. And it is called by inspiration as the little help. It says, these verses, besides foreshadowing the martyrdom of the faithful followers of Christ, predict the Reformation, the little help. So what is the little help? The Reformation. But that Reformation came up after Martin Luther delivered a deadly blow to the papacy. Let us read 2SR page 96. It says, 2SR page 96. Had not the papacy, 2SR page 96, had not the papacy received the deadly wound by Luther, the Pope could not have been put into prison by the Prince General, for before the pontifical authority received Luther's sword, the Pope reigned supreme. But the blow weakened his power, and the result was that Protestantism came upon the stage of action. 2SR page 96. So after Martin Luther delivered the deadly blow to the papacy, then came up, brothers and sisters, Protestantism. The result, Protestantism came on the stage of action. And this is the little help that's sent by God to the woman, so that the dragon who is looking the location of the woman, his attention will now be diverted. These people sacrifice their lives. And that is why here in 2SR page 228, let us read the statement here. 2SR page 228. Let us study closely the statement. If the church, 2SR 228, if the church, the woman, was in the wilderness between the years 538 and 1798 AD, in which period the above-stated reformers did their wonderful work to bring about reformation by obedience to the Scriptures, were they not called out and sent by God? Answer, surely they were. There can be no doubt about it. Their work, character, and sacrifice answers the question. Think of Luther, the father of Protestantism, who risked his life like those God's great servants in the past. God, by the hand of Luther, tore asunder the doors of darkness, brought an end to the terrible persecution and bloodshed of the saints of the Most High, and caused the light in His written word to shine into the hearts of men. Had it not been for the earnest and zealous efforts of these godly reformers, the church would have been in the wilderness until this day, and there would have been no Protestantism. Thus, their unselfish service broke the power of despotism, and by the imprisonment of the Pope, terminated the long prophetic period. 2SR page 228. So, that reading is plainly telling us, brothers and sisters, that it is God who raised these four great denominations. According to that reading in 2SR 228, surely they were raised by God. And that is the fulfillment of Daniel 11 verse 33 and 34. That after the faithful constituents of the Ephesus, all of them were already dead, and the remaining constituents are only the unfaithful. And since there was no more possibility to protect the woman, God raised up these four great denominations. They were not women. The divine commission given to them is to wound the instrumentality of the red dragon to persecute the woman. That is the little hornhead, the papacy. And it was wounded by Martin Luther by a deadly blow. And because of that effort of Martin Luther, Protestantism came on the stage of action. So, they are the little help. Although they sacrificed greatly their lives. But why is it that inspiration called it only a little help? But comparing to the prepared mighty weapon that will used by God in the last church in the New Testament succession, brothers and sisters, the church in the last generation of men, it is the earth. The earth helped the woman. Now, this is the question. Why is it that God will not raise up another movement to protect the woman? Because it is already out of plan. That woman is the last church recorded in the Bible. Therefore, if God would raise up church to protect the woman, then it is out of prophecy. And that is why, as far as the Bible is thus concerned, it is the earth, the symbolical earth, is the chosen medium of God to help the woman. Then how does the earth been able to help the woman? And why is it that the shepherd's rod called it mighty weapon? Here in track number 15. Let us read again. In track number 15, on page 87, it says, the earth, God's mighty weapon, is finally to help the woman. You see, the earth, God's mighty weapon, is finally to help the woman. Brothers and sisters, we should not even think that this statement that the earth helped the woman is pointing only to the time when the earth will open her mouth and swallow up the flood. No, that is only the climactic event. Prior to that time, in this study, we can easily discern how God portrayed the last church in the New Testament succession, that through the earth, the symbolical earth, God helped the woman completely, brothers and sisters. And we will focus to that predicted event. To repeat again, how does the earth help the woman? And since the shepherd's rod called it mighty weapon, it is very powerful. Brothers and sisters, how the symbolical earth, represented by the United States of America, that symbolical earth is the chosen medium of God to help the woman completely. The last church in the last generation of men. And remember, brothers and sisters, according to the shepherd's rod, in 11 symbolic code number 7, I would like to read 11 symbolic code number 7 from page, you can read if you wish, brothers and sisters, beginning from page 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. But in page 14, the main subject is Ezekiel 28. And I would like to remind to all the brethren that Ezekiel 28, Sister White says, no, it does not refer alone to the occurrence in heaven. Right? In Bible commentary, it is very plain, brothers and sisters, here in Bible commentary, let us read again. Hear the statement. In 4 BC, 1162 and 1163. And it is Ezekiel 28. And it says here, a general movement represented. I asked our people to study the 28th chapter of Ezekiel. The representation here made, while it refers primarily to Lucifer, the fallen angel, has yet a broader significance. Not one being, but a general movement is described, and one that we shall witness. A faithful study of this chapter should lead those who are seeking for truth to walk in all the light that God has given to His people, lest they be deceived by the deceptions of these last days. And it says, soon to be fulfilled. Then attach 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7 and 8. Then it says, the time is fast approaching when this scripture will be fulfilled. The world and the professedly Protestant churches are in this our day taking sides with the man of sin. The great issue that is coming will be on the seventh-day Sabbath. 4 BC, 1162 and 1163. But here, the commentary given by the shepherd's rod, it says here, in 11 symbolic code, number 7, pages 15 and 16, it says, you recognize this description as being that of Lucifer, yet the prophecy is addressed to the prince of Tyrus, just as Isaiah 14 associated the king of Babylon with Lucifer. By this, we are to understand that both Tyrus and Babylon are instigated by Satan and are set up to do on earth the identical wicked work that Satan did originally in heaven. But we are here told that Satan's defeat in these endeavors will be complete and shameful. This is the third and final defeat of the devil. It says, it is complete, not only complete, but shameful. And we will discuss that on our next episode, brothers and sisters. And to repeat again, since we already explained the first division of the woman as well as the second division, although there's still some portion that remain undiscussed, but majority we already explained, brothers and sisters, so that we could understand the first division and the second division during the apostolic period and during the dark ages, so that we could be able to comprehend in the last and the final division of the woman which is in conflict with the dragon. And in the second division, because in the first division, it cannot be applied Revelation 12 verse 15. Only in the second division, by which the term carried away has two significance. To the faithful, they were martyred for their faith, brothers and sisters. But to the unfaithful, they were Hittites. And since that is only talking to the Ephesus, talking about the Ephesus, Revelation 12:15. Brothers and sisters, why? Because Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, they are not woman. And the woman is only pointing to the Ephesus, which left the vineyard in 34 AD. Brothers and sisters. And that is typifying Rachel. That Rachel died while giving birth to her son, Benjamin. Brothers and sisters, according to the historical event. So here, brothers and sisters, to repeat again, Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, these four great denominations, they are not woman, but they are the little help represented by Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis. They were the little help that had been raised by God. Why did God raise them up? Because the faithful constituent of the Ephesus, represented by Judah, all of them were already dead. Brothers and sisters, and we have now the youngest, brothers and sisters. But the unfaithful, all of them have been defeated by the devil. So there will be no more to protect the woman. And God raised up the little help to protect the woman, to divert the attention of the dragon looking the location of the woman, and his instrument had been wounded to death by Martin Luther. And God's intention that the wound will be continually inflicted so that he could not have any time to find the location of the woman until the woman can return to the vineyard. We will continue this subject, brothers and sisters, and hoping the good Lord will bless us and will help us. Thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. Have a wonderful evening.